I have somehow managed to get an offer from every animation studio that I've ever interviewed with. And I've interviewed with a bunch of them, including Disney, Sony, DNEG, Method, Digital Frontier FX, Moontower VFX, Rooster Teeth. I have worked in TV series, commercials, VFX for movies, and feature film animation. Throughout all those experiences, I can confidently say that it's basically the same job everywhere. And even more confidently, I can say that it's the exact same interviewing process for all of them. Now, I'm not saying I'm the best interviewee, but for some reason they keep offering me jobs and I keep taking them. So I want to make this video about specifically interviewing for the character animator position at an animation studio. Also, my name is Peter Dang and I am an animator here at the Walt Disney Animation Studios in Vancouver. We just wrapped on Zootopia 2, so please go watch it this Thanksgiving. Thank you very much. And yeah, in this video, we're going to talk about how I think about interviews, what I say in them, what I don't say in them, how I answer specific questions, how I think about interviews in general, and what questions I like to ask towards the end of those conversations. So let's get into it. How to interview for animation studios. Disney Animator explains. That's me. So sometimes you hear an interview being referred to as the a-hole test, or a personality test, or a jerk test. And in a lot of ways, this is very true, specifically for the animation industry. It's because the position of character animator, like I said, it's very similar to other positions in other studios. And it's very evident that you are a good animator based entirely off of your demo reel. So in the animation industry, there's two things that you need to get hired. One, a good demo reel that demonstrates that you can do the job. And then two, it's your personality and you're not a jerk or a weirdo or a mean person and they like you and they want you on the team. So basically those two things. If you get an interview, it means that you've passed the first test of your demo reel being good enough. And so therefore the interview itself is really just them checking on vibes. Like they're just trying to see if you're cool, if they want to work with you, if they can imagine working overtime 12 hours a day with you, you know. So there's a lot of truth to this interview being an a-hole test. They're just trying to screen that you're not a bad person, basically. What should you expect going into an interview? Well, it's going to be very casual. I've had interviews as short as like 20 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes. And probably the most longest interview I've had is probably an hour, if that. And honestly, I think that's as much time as you need to see if you like somebody or not. And so, yeah, going into it, you're going to be talking to an animation supervisor and maybe an animation lead and maybe an HR person. But most of the time, I've just had the animation supervisor and then a lead on that particular project in those interviews. And specifically for the animation industry, I've never worn a suit ever to an interview. I've never worn a suit ever into an animation studio. That's just kind of not the vibe. I've seen supervisors come in wearing a t-shirt, and honestly, like a button-up is probably the most that I would do because it's just that type of job. You basically can show up in a t-shirt and just be very comfortable. So you don't have to wear a suit, you don't have to dress up crazy fancy or anything. It'll be a super casual conversation. And lastly, before we get into the details, I have this mindset going into these interviews that I want to appear warm, but I don't want to mistake the conversation for a conversation with friends. And specifically what I mean by that is I do want to feel familiar with them, but I know that they're not my friend because my friends know a lot of things about me, right? My friends know a lot of context about me so that when I communicate with them, I don't really have to say a lot and they'll get me. That is not an assumption that you should make with interviewing. You should assume that they know nothing about you. And so when you're explaining things about who you are or how you think or how you got to certain conclusions, you have to be extra clear about what you're communicating to them. So that's the first thing of why it's not like a conversation with friends, because they don't know anything about you. And number two, because they know nothing about you, you really have to sell yourself. You have to present yourself to them, which is something that I'm not doing with my friends, right? Even though I'm very familiar with my friends and I have that warmth, it's not like I'm trying to bring up specific accomplishments in the past, and I'm not trying to prove anything to my friends. But in an interview, I do feel like you do have to prove yourself. You do have to steer the conversation towards topics and interests that you have that would really benefit them to know more about you and to want to bring you on to the team, right? And so those two things, I kind of broadly, I just keep that in mind, that I have to be very clear with what I want to say, and I want to present myself in the best way possible and to make a good impression, right? I mean, that's all very basic, but it's still worth repeating. They know nothing about you, and so you have to present yourself in a very genuine and authentic way. All right, let's get into the interview itself. Here's 7 things that I think about constantly as I am in the interview. Number 1, consider every question an opportunity. Every question is an opportunity for you to say something good about yourself. That's how I see it. I see it that way because you have a limited amount of time to make an impression on these people. You have 30 minutes. You have 30 minutes to maybe 1 hour. And let's say in 1 hour you get asked 8 questions. That's only 8 opportunities to say one good thing about yourself, such that once they leave the interview, they won't even remember all 8 things. They'll just remember some of them, right? And so it's like on a limited time frame for you to say 1 or 2 good things about yourself. If you're really good with the answer, you could say 2 or 3 or 4 good things about yourself if you're able to kind of chain stories and anecdotes together. But every question is an opportunity. And every question is an opportunity because there's no one right answer, right? There is no one right answer to all of these questions. Consider this as well. The interviewers themselves, when they ask these questions, there's no answer choices, right? They don't have a specific correct answer in mind. They just want you to impress them. That brings me to my next point. Interviewers want to be pleasantly surprised. They do, like they really want to be surprised. They want you to give them something good without expecting what it could have been, you know? And those are the best interviews, right? Which is where they ask you a question and then you give them like an unexpected but really good answer, and you could see them respond positively to it, right? And I think that as storytellers, that's what we're doing. You know, as storytellers, when we're making a movie, we're basically giving the audience what they want without exactly knowing how they're getting it. And it's the same thing with interviewing. These interviewers, they're coming in and they know nothing about you, and they just kind of lob questions at you. And you have to take every one of them as an opportunity to pleasantly surprise them with something good about yourself that could help them know that you'd be a good addition to the team. So try to surprise them pleasantly as you're answering these questions. Number 3, what is a good answer? In my opinion, a good answer is very simple. I have 2 categories of what you can answer in, and the 2 categories are broadly the category of character and the category of competence. Character pertains to anything to do with your personality and who you are, right? These would be the adjectives that people might describe you as: hardworking, diligent, kind, compassionate, helpful, right? Any type of answer with stories that really compliment yourself, where you are portraying yourself as those adjectives, they really like to know who you are, what your character is, to see how you will fit in on the team, right? So character, that's really good. That's what we're looking for, personality. The other part of it is competence. And competence to me is simply how good you are at animation and the job itself. This could be more technical things. They might ask you about stuff on your demo reel or your workflow, or maybe shortcuts and hotkeys that you have, but mostly like how you think about animation and how you work and how good you are at doing that, right? So what is a good answer? A good answer mentions how good of a person you are or how good at animation that you are. That's a good answer. Number 4, Jenga piece analogy. In my mind, what's happening when I'm in an interview is my interviewers know nothing about me. They start off with 0. And every single question is an opportunity for me to hand them a Jenga piece of who I am as it pertains to my character or my competence. I at least try to get one good Jenga piece to them per question, but sometimes you can hand them 2 or even 3 Jenga pieces if your answer is really good, if your answer weaves character and competence into a funny story. Like, that would be one of the best answers that you could give, which is combining all those things and handing them a lot of your personality all at once. In my mind, that's what you're doing when you're answering. Every question is an opportunity for you to hand them a Jenga piece of how good of a person you are or how good of an animator that you are. Now, this goes both ways, because if you have a bad answer, you're actually still handing them a Jenga piece. It's just a really bad one. And we don't want a bad Jenga piece, okay? At the end of the interview, think about it this way. If there's only 8 questions in the whole entire interview, you've handed them 8 Jenga pieces, but 2 of them are bad, that's all they know about you. They think that 2/8 of you is not that good. And like I said, we have a limited window to answer these questions. We have a limited window of time to present ourselves to them. And so be mindful of these questions. Don't hand them a bad Jenga piece. Which leads me to number 5. No negativity about other people or yourself. So this one's a really big one. When I said that you can answer a question almost any way, it's true, except this way. I don't recommend you saying bad things about any project or any person. Just don't do it. Just stay away from it. This industry is so small that when you insult someone or you insult a project or a studio, this person will likely have known that person or that project or something. They have a connection to that. And I do not want to risk handing them this Jenga piece of me trash talking a particular director or supervisor. I think it just is not helpful at all. So if you can try really hard in these interviews, seriously, don't do it. Like, do not say anything bad about other people for sure. And I don't recommend saying anything bad about yourself. I generally just don't like that. I don't think there's any merit in it. I think that people sometimes, yes, you can have self-deprecating humor and it's very obvious to everybody that that's what you're doing. But I have seen some people do self-deprecating humor in a way that tells me they're not kidding and they're actually very insecure about themselves. And I think you should just stay away from it, honestly. Like I said, you have like 30 minutes. 30 minutes to an hour to present yourself to them. And if half the time you keep talking down on yourself and be like, oh, but I'm not good at this, or oh, like I suck at this or whatever, like honestly, just avoid that. My best advice is really just to avoid self-deprecating yourself in general. That's what I would consider a bad Jenga piece if you were to be very negative, if you were to be very mean about other people or about yourself. Number 6, you don't literally have to answer the question. What I mean by this is, like I said, every question is an opportunity, but they don't really have a specific answer that they expect you to say. There's no expectations for your answer. There's no answer choices, right? And so when they ask you a question, feel free to rephrase it. Feel free to paraphrase it and then just kind of go off on something that's tangentially related. I think that's very okay for an interview. So here's like a quick example of what that would look like. Let's say they ask you the trite question of, what is your greatest weakness? You don't literally have to answer this question. You can, and I've done this, you can just reword it. You can just be like, what do I want to improve on? Right? And then I answer that question. Rephrase the question and then answer that new question. This is a trick that politicians use and it absolutely works. Like it absolutely works, especially in an interview where, like I said, they have no expectations of what they want you to say. They just want you to impress them. They want you to pleasantly surprise them with a good answer, right? And so you don't have to answer these questions very literally, and rephrase them to your own benefits. Like rephrase them in a way that you could tell a good story that's tangentially related, that still makes sense, and then you give them a bunch of good Jenga pieces for yourself. Number 7, let them walk away feeling like it was a good time. This is kind of a general thing that I like to keep in mind. It's really like the vibe of the entire conversation, which is to always kind of clock how they're feeling. And this is mostly because people don't remember what you say, they remember how you made them feel. And I think this is very important, that they feel pretty good coming out of this, that they feel confident that you are a person of good character and who is competent at their job. And the entire time as you are in this interview, be sure to make it conversational such that they could see and imagine what it would be like to work with you. Ultimately, you want to be able to conversate with them as if you were in the office with them already working with them. There's something about that, it helps a lot for them to be like, yeah, I could totally see myself bumping into this guy in the lunchroom. I can see myself going over to his desk to talk to him about something. I can see myself working overtime and hanging out with this guy in the office. That's super important for this vibes personality test interview, basically. And a tip that could help you do that is for you to do a little bit of research on, of course, the project that you're about to work on, or the studio, and the supervisors that are in this meeting, because a lot of them have worked on a lot of movies and they have a lot to say about some of those movies, and they're happy to talk about it with you. And if you could do a little bit of research and to kind of weave that into your answers and to be able to have a little back and forth with them, right? The questions that they will ask you, like I said, is an opportunity. It's an opportunity for a conversation. It's not just an opportunity for an answer where you hand them a Jenga piece. You want it to feel very natural, where they give you a question and then you form a good answer, and then you can kind of throw it back to them by mentioning something related to a project that they worked on, and that being an inspiration to you, or even a mutual person that you both know, right? And that's going to hand them a lot of Jenga pieces, and it's going to feel very natural, and the time will fly, and they're going to feel like, cool, like I love talking to this guy. I would love to be able to work with this guy and talk with him like that some more. So let them walk away feeling confident and good about you being a member of this team. So those are the main 7 things that I always think about going into these interviews. I have 3 more tips, and these will be very broad. I can't really get into the specifics of them, but these are 3 really good to have things. Number 1, storytelling. Tell a lot of stories in this interview. Demonstrate to them that you're a good storyteller, because at the end of the day, we're animators. We are telling a story in this movie, and each shot and in each sequence that we work on, there's a little story there, right? And so as much as you can flex that storytelling muscle and to be able to entertain them, to just bring them for a ride with like some good stories, like, man, like that's always a really good thing to bring into these interviews. Number 2, be funny. Now that might sound difficult to do, but if you're naturally funny, I definitely encourage it. Even if you're not that funny, like try to look for moments to be funny, just to kind of make it light. I actually think that one of the most important things that you can do in this interview to make it flow really well is to not take it too seriously. Don't take it too seriously. Keep it light. And by keeping it light, it will feel like a conversation. And that's what you want. You want them to feel easy and relaxed, and you kind of want it to not be so rigid. And so by being funny and allowing people to laugh, and if they're funny as well, like that would be absolutely perfect, where it feels like a natural conversation. You're able to feel comfortable saying jokes, and especially if you have a funny story, like storytelling plus comedy, like we're having a good time, right? So tell stories, be funny, and lastly, I probably mentioned this before, but be conversational about it. Don't be too rigid. Don't let it just be question, answer, question, answer. Try to have it such that it's like question, answer, and then mini question back to them, and then they'll reply to you, and then have a nice response to that. Just that there's a little bit of back and forth where, like I said, you involve all of them, and you want to feel comfortable, and you want them to feel comfortable with the conversation. Okay, let's talk about specific questions that you will encounter in these interviews. Okay, this first one, you will always be asked at the beginning of every single interview. And this is a great question. This is a great opportunity for you. Tell us about yourself. Every single interviewer will ask you this, and this is a golden opportunity for you to hand them several Jenga pieces. This is a golden opportunity for you to give them so much to work with, such that for the rest of the interview, they'll be able to think about some of these answers and bring that back up. And this is like a free-for-all of like you getting to pick and choose all the best parts of your experience and your personality from the very beginning of the interview. So this is actually probably the most important part of the interview, which is the very beginning of it. Tell us about yourself. Here's how to answer this question very specifically. When they say, tell me about yourself, don't do this. Don't just start blabbing about all of the hobbies and what you do on your weekend, okay? That's probably the worst way to answer that question, because we are still in an interview. And like I said, you only have 30 minutes to give them Jenga pieces that will help you professionally. I'm sure you have a lot to say about you personally, but like honestly, they don't care about 90% of what you would say about your hobbies and how you spend your free time and all that kind of stuff. You can, if you can tastefully insert it here and there, but I don't recommend you just vomiting all of these random facts about yourself. Be very concise about what you give them. Be very concise about the Jenga pieces you want to give them. So here's how specifically to answer, tell me about yourself. Here's what you do. You look at your resume. And what you're going to do is you're going to chronologically start somewhere. Usually maybe it's one of your first animation jobs, or maybe you're a junior animator. You don't really have that many experiences. You can start a little bit earlier, but preferably you want to keep it relevant to animation stuff. And what you're going to do is you're going to go through all of your work experiences. Let's say you had maybe 2 companies that were TV shows, and then 1 VFX show, and then 1 feature animation show, right? You would just go through these experiences and think back to that time of where you were and what you were doing, and pick one thing. Pick one thing about it. Pick one Jenga piece about that particular experience, and you give that to them. And then you will go to the next one. And then you think about your time there, and then maybe you have a good story there as well, and then you can pick 1 or 2 Jenga pieces, give it to them there, and then you go to the next one and the next one. And what you want to do is you don't want to just simply repeat your resume. You want to include things that are not on your resume. You want to give them additional stories that cannot be found on your resume, but it is of that time period on the resume, right? Because they will have already seen your resume. They already know that. You want to give them things that they don't know about the resume. So you go chronologically, and a good Jenga piece would be either an accomplishment that you had during that time. Like let's say you graduated from a big animation school and you completed a short that won a bunch of awards. You can talk about that, and you can kind of talk about it like a little bit and try to bring in some character and some competence into it and the specific achievements about it, and then just go to the next thing, okay? You don't want to spend too long on one particular thing unless it's like very relevant, but chronologically, go from one studio to the next studio. And if there is no achievement on that show, talk about one thing that you learned on it that was very important to you, or one big thing that impacted you. And that's usually a very good place to be, where when you go from show to show and then you think about, you know, the 1 year that you were on the show and what did you learn from it? How did you improve? Like, what was the most important thing on, for example, for me, I worked on Garfield, okay? What is one thing I can pull from that experience to try to give them a nice little story to kind of move on to the next one? And so if I had to pick Garfield, I would say something like, yada, yada, yada. I was at Method Studios, where I was working on my first VFX show, which is Thor, Love and Thunder. And this job was really awesome and challenging because it was my first VFX show, and I was working with motion capture, and I had to animate very realistically. I was animating super detailed humanoid robots being punched in the face by Thor. And I had extra challenges to do all this motion capture stuff on top of the hand key animation. So technically it was very challenging, but I think I learned a lot about how to animate very realistic physicality. After Method, I went to DNEG, and that was where I worked on Nimona, and then quickly after, Garfield. Really quickly about Nimona, that was probably the best experience that I've ever had working on a production. And it was the best experience because the production every single person in it was so passionate about the project, and you could feel the energy of it, and it really energized everybody to work a lot harder and to work faster. But we were all so passionate about, we were so excited to see everything in dailies that it gave us this energy that I had never had on any production. So that was a really cool production. And then you move on from Nimona to Garfield, and on Garfield, man, it was one of the more cartoony shows I've ever done. Like I said, I worked on very realistic animation with Thor Love and Thunder, and then Nimona was back to the land of feature film animation, but then Garfield was like way more towards Hotel Transylvania, and so it really pushed my style of animation, and it was really fun to figure out the technicalities of smear frames and all that extra stuff that you would do to get that image on that one frame. And I remember specifically on Garfield, the director was Mark Dindo, and he was amazing because he also directed Emperor's New Groove, and the humor in Emperor's New Groove is exactly like Garfield, and I loved it so much. You know, I was watching Emperor's New Groove, and then I was trying to really amp up the humor, and we would go into dailies, and Mark Dindo is always just laughing his ass off. Like, he is trying to make it as funny as possible, and he's laughing at his own jokes, and it honestly was such a fun experience. Back to back, Nimona and then Garfield, and I got a lot of really great cartoony shots, and it was just so much fun as well working on the cartoony style of animation. So that was 3 examples, and you basically keep doing this. You can tell these small stories, you can name drop directors, you can talk about the differences between these projects, you can talk about what you learned, because what you're doing is you are both expanding your character and basically what your interests are and what your values are, right? Like, I talked a little bit about VFX and the realism and how I like that versus the styles. And Nimona, actually, that's probably competence, right? So competence would be like, hey, I have a range of styles that I'm good at. Hey, I have this experience plus this experience. But then you can talk about, you know, your hard work and the passion and all these other like character specific things, which, by the way, character specific things is also like what your interests are. These supervisors, they really do want to know what your interests are, because once you're on the project, what you're most interested in is probably going to be your best work. So they really want to know what they can cast you. If you can tell them like, hey, I'm very passionate about action and adventure, and or I want singing shots, or like, you know, you can mention all of those in this section of Tell Me About Yourself. And so basically, you keep doing that, you highlight one thing, story to story, and then eventually you will hit your most current role in your resume, and this is how you end it. Blah, 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 blah. And so yeah, Garfield was my most recent project, and I really loved it very much. But then I saw you guys hiring for this project, and I just happened to be towards the end of my contract, and I knew also that you guys were in Vancouver, and I loved Moana back when it came out in 2016, and that's what leads me to talking with you guys here today. End with that sentence. Come up with a segue of your interest or your competence or some history or some story to lead you to, and that's what brings me to talking with you guys all today, because I really love Moana 2 and I really needed to be a part of it. And so basically you've just handpicked some of the best Jenga pieces of yourself, and then you kind of handed it to them when you say, and that's what brings me here today. It passes the baton to them in this conversation for them to be able to comment on anything you just said, right? You gave them so many Jenga pieces, and likely there's probably 1 or 2 or 3 of them that they're very interested in talking to you about. I remember in my interview with Disney, I luckily had Graham as a supervisor in my interview, and he worked at Blue Sky for a long time, and Nimona was a Blue Sky project, and so then we got to talking about Blue Sky a bunch, and we had some mutual friends as well, and that honestly is always a good thing when you have mutual friends come up and you're like, oh yeah, I worked with that person here and here, and then, you know, they're like, oh yeah, this person's great, and then, man, there's always some stories associated with those, and that's a really great moment to be able to kind of be like, hey, you know this person you like? I like that person too. Here's a funny story about that person. And they're like, man, I love that person. That's a great moment of like a, you know, connecting with them and making it feel like a conversation. So that's how I answer. Tell me about yourself. You go chronologically and you highlight one thing about each of those experiences. And you could also add in like tiny snippets of like where you were at in life, like which city or which town that was, like what hobbies you were doing. Like mention that only a little bit, right? Because that's not as important as the animation experiences that you had. But it's good to give them personality, right? To give them like, oh, like, yeah, I do this. And then, oh yeah, when here I was like really into hiking, and then here I was playing basketball a lot, but then that's how I met this animator friend of mine, blah, blah, blah. Like you could weave in a pretty cool story, progression timeline. And like I said, the purpose of that is to maximize how much stuff that they could work with as you're handing them these Jenga pieces. This second question, you will for sure be asked, how did you get into animation? Or what are your biggest animation influences? Now, this question everybody loves. Everybody loves to hear about how somebody else got inspired. You know, there's no wrong answer whatsoever. And this question lends itself to storytelling. Everybody who's inspired by things, there's memories there, right? There's memories there and you're inspired by it. And it kind of is a reoccurring theme in your life that you revisit sometimes. And at any of those moments, you know, that's a story. It's a chance to connect with them. It's a chance to be funny. And bonus points if a lot of your inspirations apply to the project that you're applying for. If they're like related to the project that you are applying for, and that tells them that there's this synergy of your inspiration and the project at hand. And as we all know, the more inspired you are about something, like the more energy you're gonna have and the higher quality animation that you're just gonna have when you're working on something you're inspired by. So yeah, there's no wrong answers to this particular question. Try to end your answer with something relevant to the project at hand. At the end of the day, like I said, the supervisors are just trying to imagine you already working on this project. They want to know if you have the character and competence to work on this project, and they're already trying to think of shots that they're going to cast you, basically. And so when you talk about inspirations, like they're already in their head, they know some of the shots in the movies, and they're like, oh yeah, this person could be good for some of these sequences. They are thinking that, right? So try to be genuine, always be authentic with your responses. Never lie. Like that should be number 8 on this video. Don't lie. Lying is bad. Be truthful and tie your answer to the project at hand. If you could choose your next set of shots, what would they be? This one's a great one because it's a question about self-awareness. They're trying to see what you think of yourself. They're trying to see how good you think you are. And spoiler alerts, they know exactly how good you are. These are supervisors who have souped on a bunch of movies. They've been working in animation for a long time. And when they saw your demo reel, they know exactly how good you are. And so they're just trying to gauge, is Peter self-aware that he is a junior level feature animator, but he's expecting senior level shots, right? Like that's kind of one thing that they're looking for is like, okay, does this person know how good they are? But 2, it's also a question about interest and inspiration, because sometimes you could ask for shots that you don't like. You could ask for shots that's not typically on your demo reel. And you could ask for shots that are exactly like your demo reel because maybe that's what you're most passionate about. But this is a great question for them to gauge, where is this animator at in their journey and what are they trying to do? Like what do they want to do on this movie that we're working on? And it honestly gives them a good idea of what to cast you because they are, like I said, they're trying to imagine you working there already. And they're like, oh, if Peter was already working here, what shots would I give him right now? In the past, I have answered it with, hey, give me more action shots because I love action. But also in the past, I've answered, give me more acting shots because I really need to improve in acting, and I've grown more and more fond of acting as I've been working on some of these projects. And so, yeah, there's a bunch of different answers you could go with. My best advice is to, yeah, just imagine that they're future casting you to shots and then answer accordingly. What did you learn on Nimona? Or insert another project here. So yeah, I've gotten this question a couple of times, and it's a pretty casual question. It's not a super hard one because it's very open-ended. And I actually think that this question is fueled by curiosity by this supervisor or this lead, because, you know, maybe they really liked that project, but they heard some stories about it, or they know some people that worked there. And they're just kind of curious, like, hey, what was it like on that project? What did you learn? Who did you hang out and learn from? And like, what was that entire experience like? And that's kind of like just casual animator talk, I think. Like, for example, I would love to know what it was like working on Monsters University, or Frozen 1, or Tangled even, you know, like these are just questions that animators are geeking out about because they love some of these projects and they know some of the people that have worked on there. So yeah, these types of questions, again, think of the Jenga pieces you want to hand them. If you have any funny stories involving some people that they might know, that's a good answer too, because that's just going to pleasantly surprise them. And I think that's just really good conversation, being able to talk about a project that you're both passionate about, or like a person that you both really like. So yeah, it's a pretty solid question. I would say prepare for this by going through your resume and just knowing what you could say about some of the experiences on there if they ask you about it. Did you have any bad experiences working with directors? Now this one's a good one, because it's a trap. It's a trap because, like I said, you don't want to ever say anything bad about anybody. And so you might get these questions where they are trying to suss out, like, hey, like I heard this production was really bad. Can you tell me about that, right? It is a trap in my opinion, because I don't want you to think that I trash talk people. And even if that's not who I am, like I said, let's say in this interview, I can only hand them 8 Jenga pieces, and one of the Jenga pieces is me trash talking a director, right? I don't want you to think that because you only have 8 Jenga pieces, that 1/8 of me is a trash talker or a person who talks bad about people behind their back. Even worse, if you accidentally say something bad about a person that they know, that's super bad, because maybe they're friends with that director. You know, maybe they really like that director. Maybe, I don't know, they have some sort of relation to that project, to that director, to that company. And I just think that you should just avoid any negativity, just to avoid that scenario of being known as a person who complains a lot or accidentally insults somebody that they know. So best not to say anything negative at all. And again, this is one of those questions that you can reframe. And I would say that maybe you had an experience with a director that you didn't like. Just reframe it to focus on your ability to adapt to stubborn personalities and highlight how good you are in those environments with those people. That's it. You don't have to say anything bad. You can be very vague about it, and then you can talk about your ability to adapt. You can just reframe it. Just reframe it so that you can hand them still a good Jenga piece and not a bad Jenga piece. What are your weaknesses? Or as I like to reframe it, what would you like to improve about yourself? Again, this is another self-awareness question. It just depends on your ability to find something about yourself that's truthful, that you can reframe. And this is kind of a classic interview question, right? But like I said, reframe it and then answer that new thing. I think this is a tricky question because you don't want to appear fake humble. You don't want to be like, oh, I work too much, or like, oh, I'm too much of a perfectionist, which, yeah, you could say those things. But I would say it'd be more impressive if you were able to pinpoint a specific thing that you could work on, and then to get practical about it and to explain to them some of the steps that you're already taking to overcome that weakness. And I think that would really impress them. And I think that a lot of people have a lot of weaknesses, and that's just kind of a fact for everybody. I think that the parts that is most important to them is your ability to make a plan and stick with it, and then maybe to chart your progress over time to improve this weakness, because they want to see you apply that system to maybe another weakness that you might have. And I think that, again, don't be too negative on yourself, but look for ways to spin it and then give them confidence that even if you do have weaknesses, it'll be okay. You can fix them, you can solve them, you can get better. Give them that confidence. So that's just some of the questions that you might be asked in the interview. And honestly, the principles apply to every single one of them. just try to hand them a nice Jenga piece about yourself. Don't be negative. Tell stories. Be conversational. Be funny. Just remember those things and be authentic, and I think you're going to do pretty good. Now, at the end of the interview, they'll likely ask if you have questions for them. At this point, I think it's a good idea to have 1 or 2 questions ready. These questions could be anything. Anything that you're genuinely interested in about the studio, about the culture, about the project, about the working conditions. Have a couple questions ready. I think it's nice to kind of throw it back to them and let them answer and maybe tell a story or something. But yeah, don't think about it too hard. It should be authentic. Like, you should really want to know the answer to these questions. A couple questions in my back pockets would be something that informs them that I want to really excel at this job. So I might ask them something like, can you remember a time when an animator went above and beyond and did something that affected the movie? When they showed a shot and people loved that animation so much that it actually affected a character or it affected something in the plot. You know, like, I'm very curious as to how one could really help make these movies better, right? There could be another question where you're like, can you think of anybody you know that was really good at animation and then they showed a knack for leadership and then they were promoted to becoming a supervisor, right? Like, that would be, you know, you kind of showing that, like, hey, I'm interested in doing more. I'm interested in being a lead. I'm interested in these things. So you can ask questions like that, or you can ask specific questions of culture. So you could say, yeah, can you tell me what you love about working with this team? Right? So that's a pretty open-ended question, but I think that it's good to demonstrate that you want to know what's the best part about this team and I want to be a part of it. And I think they're going to be very happy to answer some of these questions for sure. So have a couple questions in your back pocket. That's always a good way to end these things. And yeah, that's basically it. They ask you questions, you ask them questions. And if it's a good vibe, like I said, the personality test, there's a really strong chance that you will get the job. So what happens after that interview, right? Usually salary negotiations, if you get the job, if they give you an offer, that happens after. One quick thing about salary is you can try to negotiate. They're used to it. Don't be afraid to negotiate with the salary. And yeah, I've had good experiences negotiating up and I was very happy with those decisions. So yeah, that's the interviewing process. I think at the heart of it, you just want to make them feel confident that you're fit for the job. Like, they're going to remember not what you say, but how you made them feel. And if you're able to work in really good answers with good storytelling and being funny, and at the same time talking about competence, like, you will give them confidence that you would be a good fit for the team. So those are my thoughts on interviewing. If you're out there, you're about to have an interview soon, good luck. I wish you the best. I hope that animators will find this video, not just junior animators, but even mid or senior animators as well, just because, you know, a lot of people, they don't really think about interviewing as a skill, and that's what it is. It is a skill. You can get better at it, and I hope this video was helpful for a lot of you. So thanks for watching. Like and subscribe, everyone. Good luck. Hey, if you like that video, I have a couple more here. One of them is about who I am and what I've worked on. And this one is about animation opportunities. So go on and click one of those if you are interested in more animation conversations.